the South Carolina Association of Counties.
I'm Sue Leeson, Senior Justice, Oregon Supreme Court.
And I'm Beth Ratway. I'm a Senior Technical Assistant Coordinator for the American Institutes for Research.
All right, I'll ask the team if you'll introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, judges. My name is Max Rock. Outside of We the People, I am the treasurer of our school's National Honor Society, and I also compete in tennis, basketball, and baseball. Next fall, I will be attending Barrett Honors College at Arizona State University to study aerospace engineering.
Good afternoon, judges. My name is Tiffany Krolick. I'm the executive officer for our school's JROTC program, and next year I plan to attend the University of Nevada, Reno to study neuroscience.
Hi, I'm Chase Corman, outside of We the People. I'm the Incline Robotics team captain, and next fall I plan to study political science at the New College of Humanities in London.
Thank you very much. If y'all are ready, we will, I'll read the question. This is question 1 from Unit 2. What were the major disagreements among the 55 delegates during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution?
George Washington stated, "My wish is that the convention may adopt no temporizing expedients, but probe the defects of the Constitution to the bottom and provide a radical cure." The major disagreements among the 55 delegates at the Constitutional Convention were the issues of representation, the protection of natural rights, and the topic of slavery. Most of the framers went into the Constitutional Convention with the intent of changing and modifying the Articles of Confederation. They did not intend on writing and creating an entirely new form of government. The focus on creating a new system blindsided many of the delegates and accounted for the majority of the controversy in ratifying the document.
In drafting the Constitution, the framers drew on prior systems that they had developed during the colonies. When it came to representation, James Madison's Virginia Plan and William Patterson's New Jersey Plan provided a framework for the founders to consider. After months of deliberation, they combined their plan into the infamous Great Compromise, creating a bicameral legislature incorporating ideas from both plans.
An area of disagreement concerned natural rights. The Anti-Federalists believed that the Constitution did not sufficiently protect natural rights, while the Federalists argued that the Constitution's checks and balances offered enough protection. This fight dragged beyond the Constitutional Convention and was the main topic of many of the ratification debates. Ultimately, this dispute led to the addition of the Bill of Rights.
Another issue that plagued the convention was the question of slavery. The framers of the Constitution believed that compromises on slavery were necessary for support from the Southern delegates and preserving the Union. Though discussed at length, the founders were not able to resolve this question before the end of the convention, though certain aspects of the Constitution, such as the 3/5 clause, were the result of these discussions.
However, it did not end the quarrel over slavery. The Fifth Three Rule caused considerable problems for abolitionists who wished to justify the proposed Constitution to their constituents. As former Justice Thurgood Marshall stated, the Constitution was defective from the start. The framers consented to a document which laid the foundation for the tragic events which were to follow. By ignoring the faults of the Constitution, the framers planted seeds for future conflicts, such as the Civil War.
The founders also believed that the Constitution should be able to change with the times. As Thomas Jefferson stated, laws and institutions must go hand in hand with the progress of the human mind. As that becomes more enlightened and manners and opinions change, institutions must advance to also keep pace with the times. We agree with Jefferson's assessment and believe that changes should be made to the Constitution pertaining to the Electoral College.
Concerning the Electoral College, we do not believe that this system fairly represents the voting rights of citizens. 3 of the last 6 presidents won the Electoral College, but not the popular vote. We propose removing the Senate from the Senate vote in the Electoral College and switching to a proportional way of voting that gets rid of the winner-take-all system. Arguably, this would encourage more people to vote because they would have equal representation.
Henry Clay stated, The Constitution of the United States was made not merely for the generation that existed, but for the unlimited, undefined, endless, perpetual prosperity. The framers created the Constitution intending to give the national government enough power for the government to act on a national level, but without enough power to put fundamental rights at risk. The framers knew they could not solve every problem at the convention, so they intentionally left many aspects of the Constitution vague, with a way to change the Constitution through the amendment process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sue, would you like to ask the first question?
Sure. In your presentation, you say that the failure to resolve the slavery matter and the 3/5 compromise planted the seeds of the Civil War. That says to me they should have solved the problem in 1787. Question one, how would they have done that? And question two, what would have been the odds of getting enough agreement to send the document out for ratification if they had persisted?
What I believe the founders should have done when considering whether slavery should or should not be incorporated into the Constitution, I believe that they should have taken a firm stance on the side of human rights and on the side of abolitionment and abolished and completely banned slavery from the Constitution. This would likely create a rift between, this would guaranteed create a rift between the North and the Southern states. However, I believe that this was a necessary cut to make and would help us avoid many of the problems that we would eventually experience in the future, ranging from the civil rights movement to the Civil War and even to today's Black Lives Matter movements.
Okay, so here's the political reality, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I just want you to reason it through for me. If the anti-slavery states had taken that strong stand, the slave states would have walked out. The convention hit crisis on July 4th over exactly that question. They would have walked out. Would we have been better off to go forward under the Articles of Confederation? Because that would have been the political reality.
I do not believe we would have been better off under the Articles of Confederation, as the Articles of Confederation had many problems, including how states had too much power, where they were able to regulate trade among themselves between states, and they did not have a strong central government. It was
I get that, but we're focusing on slavery. I've just got to keep your focus there. If we can't solve the slavery problem at the convention because the South would have walked out, the convention dissolves, the status quo ante is the Articles of Confederation. Is that better than kicking the ball down the road and having a civil war? That's the horrible question I'm asking you.
No, I don't believe that it would have been better off just kicking it to the curb right there and really dealing with it at the convention. In a letter from James Madison to Washington during the ratification debates after the Constitutional Convention, he writes that the unity of the states is very fragile and that any compromises that should be made must be made in order to keep the sanctity of the Union in peace.
To elaborate off of my colleague Chase, Madison also stated that during the convention, the debates changed and shifted from the small to large states, as we saw the conflicts in the Articles of Confederation, towards a North versus South battle between whether should or should not be incorporated. And I agree with Chase in that kicking the ball down the road would have only made it worse. And I think that if we had either immediately made a decision or waited and disbanded the Constitutional Convention until we could come up with a firmer solution, we would have perhaps been better in the future.
Thank you.
I'm going to talk a little bit about changing with the times. And Mr. Jefferson, who wasn't there, but decided to say that it should be flexible, nimble, and be able to change with the times. Is that the purpose of the amendment process? Does the amendment process do that? How can the Constitution change with the times? You had said, you talked about it being the amendment process. Is that the only way?
I believe not only is the amendment process one of the ways to do this, but through Marbury versus Madison in the process of judicial review, this can be used as an alternative way to set standards and set ideals to be used in the future, whether times are changing and times are adjusting to view the Constitution differently than it was in 1776 and 1787.
One such example of how we have seen the amendment process work when changed with the times is with the 17th Amendment, which originally had the states electing the senators for each state, and it was changed in the 1900s to have the citizens of each state elect the senators instead.
Okay.
Is there a possibility, however, of factions or strong-voiced political groups hijacking our Constitution then? You had the prohibitionists able to amend the Constitution to outlaw alcohol. That lasted until early 1930s. And we rejected it at that point. At what point do you say, is there a disadvantage to the amendment process in keeping the Constitution with the times?
The pressure by certain factions during the passing of the 18th Amendment were immense. We saw legions of people coming together and voicing opinions in government through very strong lobbying and almost terrorist type actions, whether it be threatening civilian infrastructure in states like Virginia, or demanding things be done in the Congress, which ultimately led to the passing of the 18th Amendment. However, we did see the popular sovereignty and the upholding of the voice of the people reigns through in the 21st Amendment. So I do think that the amendment process, although we have had a few, very few, with really the 18th only being the only one I can really disagree with, being the only exception to the amendment process working to promote progressive behavior in the United States.
And to elaborate off of my colleague Chase, I think that the reason that the founders and the framers made it so hard to amend the Constitution with requiring 2/3 of the House and Senate and 3/4 of the states, I believe that because they made it so hard, they believed that they didn't want the Constitution to purely be swayed by popular interest. People had to agree from both sides to amend the Constitution and to make such a monumental change to our government. And this is why there's only been 27 amendments, including the Bill of Rights, to change the government and to change the Constitution.
However, to disagree with my colleagues, I believe that it can become a huge issue. We could see a repeat of what happened with the 18th Amendment, as over the past couple decades, polarization in Congress has become increasingly more. And if one party controls both houses, then it can become increasingly more likely that they can start passing amendments if they have the majority rule in both houses.
I'm going back to a comment I thought I heard you say that with respect to amendments, the goal is a progressive good. Are we guaranteed that we're only ever going to see progressive amendments apart from prohibition?
I don't believe that there's any guarantee that there is progressive good within the amendments, as the amendments can change regardless of whatever can be proposed and changed by the senators. And so I think that if we have if our popular sovereignty works and we have the senators in the House and the state legislatures elected to the interests of the people, we would only see progressive good throughout the amendment process.
That's
so
time. That's time.
Next time.
Next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you, students,
Thank
very
you.
much.
Sue, you want to begin with comments?
Sure. What a great presentation. Thank you very much. Very lively, well organized. You addressed all of the parts of the question, and believe it or not, there are times when people don't. I love it when we start out a presentation with George Washington being presented as a radical, or even using the word radical change. That's pretty intriguing, especially given the role that he played at the convention. Where I would push you some, I get the criticism of the convention for planting the seeds of the Civil War. There, and I just unquestionable. But when we criticize, we have to be prepared to think about what the alternatives were, what the choices were. Now, arguably, you could say we should have fought that Civil War, given up on governing, fought the Civil War in the 18th century. Fewer people would have died. The technology of the 19th century let hundreds of thousands of people be killed. But if that's where you are, go ahead and own it. The slavery issue would have taken us to war. There appears not to have been a governmental solution to it. But I would just ask you to have the courage to own that, if you will, radical solution. Better to fight wars sooner than later. We didn't get to push very hard on the Electoral College. I'm always surprised, you're Nevada, I'm Oregon, when we small states are saying, we want to get rid of the very thing that gives us a voice at the table and means that every now and then we're going to see a presidential candidate. Popular vote, we don't exist. We're just out of the discussion altogether. And do we really want that? I just am not sure. Anyway, you've put so many things on the table that are so thought-provoking, and that's what makes just a terrific conversation to have in a competition like this. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Let me, I want to kind of piggyback off of something Sue said is, I like your idea that of potentially reforming the Electoral College, but like Oregon, South Carolina is a small state. The only time we would see a presidential candidate getting rid of the Electoral College is from the underside of his plane looking up as he flies over. I mean, we have, I think, total of 9 electoral votes, given the 57 that California has right now. I thought your comment on dropping the senators, I wish you had spent a little bit of time fleshing that out a little bit, because I'd like to know the reasoning why you think that the senators part of the Electoral College, but the House should still be part.
Okay, thank you. I agree. I think you had a really nice through line in your opening presentation. And then really kind of thinking about and grounding it at the end in the Electoral College. I would have liked to maybe hear 1 or 2 other changes besides just the Electoral College. So that would give us some other things to kind of poke at in terms of our conversations after. I really enjoyed our conversation because it was a conversation, and your views and your evidence in terms of our questions. I think thinking about all the different choices that play a role in terms of changing the Constitution, what does that look like? What does that feel like? Sorry. And how does that impact how you think about each of those components in terms of, is it just an amendment? Is that realistic? It's really complicated. There's a reason it hasn't been done. And what are some choices, and how have we been through changing the Constitution and viewing the Constitution in different ways, and how as it was written, have we, and it's stayed that way, you know, for however long, 233 years. How can we see things differently now? What are ways that changes that should be made? I think looking at it from a substance versus functional kind of component, and looking at substantively, this is kind of what should be changed. This is what could be changed based on where we live now, versus functional, which is when you're trying to get at some of the Electoral College pieces. But I think you really it was a very natural conversation, and you're very passionate about this and balanced, and we really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Thank you all as well.